nearly 200 years of its history, it has been a military command post and a place to drink an ale. When John Jupian and Heather Fife bought the stone building known as the Brown House, it was in need of repair. Now, after a devoted restoration, its vibrancy has been restored. John starts his home history tour near the oldest part of the house. John, this is really unusual. I mean, it's like a fossil, a preservation of early domestic life. That's obviously what you're aiming for.
Well, it is indeed a 19th century farmstead and a tavern with the associated outbuildings, domestic buildings, smokehouse, dairy, so yes.
Now, when you first came here, was it in very good shape or was it falling apart?
The building was in need of much repair, but it was unique, being stone, and you know, in the setting next to the Niagara Escarpment.
Now, did you ever wonder and say, you know, there's no way I think that this can be restored? What was it about it that you thought that was worth all the effort that we're about to see?
Well, having worked for the National Historic Sites and Monuments Board and having seen archaeological ruins restored, certainly I felt that this had a lot more potential.
You're not hard to please.
No, not at all.
Okay, let's take a tour of this historic site.
Very good, come on in.
John, one of the first impressions coming in this home, of course, is the history. I mean, it just kind of hits you and gets into your blood. Mm-hmm. But I'm surprised that this whole area is this big. I mean, I expected it to be a small, ancient foyer.
Well, this is really the classic Georgian sort of entrance hallway, and it's quite typical of the period. It's typical late 18th, early 19th century, and it is commodious. In the early days, they would generally use the hallway a lot as a living area in the summer, and frequently in the hotter weather, the front door was open and the rear door, and you got excellent cross ventilation through the hallway. Georgians often moved a table into the hallway and would dine, and hence the term dining hall actually sort of evolved out of the sort of central dining area or center hall.
Is that because of the breeze, or is it just a strange thing?
Good cross ventilation right through, and in the days before air conditioning, yes, it would have been good in terms of breezes and ventilation in the summer.
We can keep it in mind if our air conditioning ever breaks. Now, the colors here, you must have picked historic colors that meant something. Tell us why the selection.
Well, determining the color was sort of an archaeological process. We simply went down through the layers of paint to the bottom layer and determined from that, based on the principles of superimposition, which was the earliest color. And the dark blue that's here is quite typical again of that Georgian, late Georgian period. It's a cobalt-based blue that would have been mixed with red lead.
So you actually scraped under the paint and found the exact color, the first one that was ever here in the original?
Yes, and we've mixed colors, or we've tried using commercial paints, but usually we end up making our own, you know, by adding darks and lights. But this is a commercial paint with, you know, other tints added, so we were able to attain the color. The walls, the flat walls, are simply a whitewash, which was like the house, burnt limestone, burnt to a powder, and mixed with glues and sizing and milk, and hence the term milk paint really evolved.
Which is popular again. You can get milk paint.
Yes,
it's back in. Now, this stairwell, it's got, I mean, what can I say? I mean, it looks authentic.
Well,
I mean,
it is.
Did you work at it, or was it?
Well, it's in process. It's being restored still. The stairs are black walnut, and the banister and rail and spindles are walnut, banister walnut, as they would have called it at the time. And the turnings and whatnot are in the Hepplewhite style, late Georgian again. Another little telltale of the period of the house, really.
What about the moldings? What can we tell about the period of house?
Well, good thing you mentioned that. The moldings are again, the Georgian moldings, known as Georgian in England and Federal in the U.S. Of course, this house was built by a Loyalist family, and when they came here from the United States, they brought the Federal style with them, the molding details that they would have been familiar with in the U.S. And here in Ontario, we refer to this molding as Loyalist, this profile.
Now the floor as we come in, I mean, we see in many historic homes that have been restored, they do a version of this kind of painting. Is there a reason why you painted the floor? Was this original, or is this your...
Well, when I bought the house, there were 3 linoleum floors here and a pine floor under that, and below that, this original pine floor. So, you know, again, it was an archaeological process in a sense. In the rear portion of the hall, we found the stencil, and the stencil...
So this was actually here. You found evidence of this.
Well, we've reproduced it, but okay. We found some details which we preserved, although we had to repair the floor and re-stencil it. And this style of flooring is an imitation of European tile.
Now there's an original part of the house and a house that's relatively new, which is really old compared to most of the houses that we all live in. But why don't we begin in the old kitchen, because I understand that's where the whole story begins here in this home.
Sure.
Okay,
yes.
Let's go.
This is indeed the oldest part of the house, and it was built by John Brown, the original owner of the property, in conditions with his land grant. He was a loyalist, disbanded at Fort Niagara in 1783, and ended up here in Louth or Grantham in 1786. He had to build a house that was exactly 20 by 18 feet, which is the perimeter measurements of this rear portion of the house, and he had to occupy it for 1 year before his patent was granted. And that grant was in 97, so 1796. It's the oldest documented building in St. Catharines.
That's something very, very special. Now, let's talk about then and now. Then, what was this room used for? I mean, was this the whole house? Everybody lived in this room?
Yes, initially this was the domestic area where cooking would have been done in the fireplace, the hearth behind us, a living room. And the little stairway over there would have taken you up an accordion set of stairs to a half-story garret or a loft above where the family would have slept. And John and his wife Magdalena lived here, and their 5 children.
I was going to say, I wonder how many people.
Big family.
We really expect a lot of space these days, I guess. Now, when you took it over, when you realized how historically important this room was, what kind of restoration job did you have ahead of you?
Well, this room was probably in need of more restoration and repair than other parts of the house. It had been used as a portion of the farm well, actually by the Powers family, who were the people I bought it from. And they had been in the house since 1901, and they did most of their sorting and grading of peaches and pears. They were farmers. And to do that, they had to have a doorway to load their tractor trailer so they could get to market at 5 o'clock on Saturday morning. And to do that, they took out a portion of the hearth in the brick oven behind me.
So you had to put it back in?
There was quite a bit of restoration involved in just doing the fireplace. And plaster repair, this is 90% of the original plaster. We had to repair certain parts of it, and again, looking for the original paint colors here, and some replacement of trim and a chair rail and that sort of thing.
You've got original artifacts in here. You've got a loom and a table, and it looks like a museum. I mean, it's very, very authentic. How did you find these pieces?
Well, I think I've spent my lifetime hunting through old buildings and talking to older people and collecting this sort of thing. And these are mostly all local pieces that have come out of the Niagara Peninsula. We've accumulated these things over the years, and we use them. The policy is we're a living museum, I suppose, in a sense. We live with the artifacts, and I've raised a family here. My children, I think, have learned to appreciate older things and live with them. We like to use the facilities that are here, and we cook in the hearth, and we use the brick oven and the iron oven, you know, on Saturdays. But of course, when we have to get to work at 7:30 in the morning on weekdays, we use the modern kitchen. But we use this as a sort of a family dining area and a living room, in a sense.
I got a
keeping room sort of thing.
Maybe if we open some of the cupboards, I bet there's a Nintendo game. No?
It's downstairs.
I knew it was here somewhere.
It is.
Let's continue with the tour.
Sure.
When Images of Home continues, peeling back the layers of history at the Brown House. Now, John, this is an enormous dining room by anyone's standards. Is this historically representative of how they would spend their time eating, the kind of room?
Yes, I think it's quite typical, actually, of a Georgian or early 19th century dining room. It's large by today's standards, but at that time, people didn't have televisions, so for recreation in the evening, they would have a meal. And it was somewhat of a family affair. A lot of time was spent around the dining room table. The house has 6 fireplaces. The fireplaces were the primary heat source. So all the principal rooms had a fireplace. This one being a principal room, it included.
Now the color, I'd call it mustard, but it's a very bold, dramatic color. Mm-hmm. Why did you choose it? Because I know that it's either come from a history books or you found a scrap of it somewhere before you put it on the walls here.
Well, indeed, we did find the ochre yellow, and mustard is a good way to describe it. It is a mustard tone. Ochre is a natural pigment, an earth color. It was everywhere, the ceilings, the floor, so we did find traces of it here.
Okay. What about the stenciling? Is it authentic as well?
Yeah, this room had been covered with wallpaper, quite a number of coats of wallpaper. Under the wallpaper we found the stencil, and we've preserved elements of each of the motifs, which you'll see throughout the room.
It's original stencil?
Yeah, this was repaired. We copied the original stencil. We've maintained an extant sample of each of the elements, but after plaster repairs we re-stenciled most of it.
Now, the floor cloth, is this original or a creation?
This one is a reproduction. When we restored the floor, we found a small piece of cotton canvas in the corner behind me with a hand-forged tack in it, and hence, we had good evidence of the floor cloth. And floor cloths were typical of the floor coverings used at that time. They were simply sail canvas, the large canvases that would have been used on a tall ship.
So they get an old sailboat and actually use the...
They would use the same duck canvas, cotton canvas, and it would be stretched on a stretcher and treat it with a glue-based sizing and a number of coats of lead paint, and then the stencil and a spar varnish finish, and then tacked down to the floor, okay, so which is what we've done. This one, we had no indication of the motif on it, so we copied the motif on the floor covering of the Worsley family in Montreal in 1809, painting done by William Bursey.
So you knew there was some connection there, pretty authentic.
Yes.
Good decision. Now, the furniture used here, I mean, it's very elegant, but it looks utilitarian. How do you figure out the kind of stuff that fits into this place? Okay,
well, again, in a dining room, you'd find certain furnishings. The extension table was an Ontario find. It's a Sheridan-style extension table.
And that would match?
Which would have been from the period. The sideboard came out of a local estate. It's Sheridan period as well. It has a very interesting inventory inside of one of the drawers of all the tumblers and goblets and wine glasses.
The actual thing was left? The actual list?
It's glued on the back of one of the cupboards. And other things that you would find in a dining room, such as the tea caddy behind us to lock away your tea. Tea was an import. It was an expensive commodity. In those days, more expensive than coffee, because it came from the Orient, and you kept it under lock and key in a special box. In case your guests would come over and steal it from you? Or your domestics, maybe, your housekeeper. So you kept it locked away. Now, you're mentioning this was kind of a parlor room, and we have soft furniture in here as well. That's something we don't do in our dining rooms now, but something... Exactly, yeah. It is a dining parlor, and after the meal, the family would have spent time here around the warm fireplace, and savored the meal, sat back and read the paper. Now the windows are lovely, and they're lovely because I'm sure that you've copied them from, or whatever you've done with them, made sure that they match historically. But the curtains I think would do well in any decor. Oh, thank you. Yeah, these are a Sheridan style curtain. Thomas Sheridan in his furniture book recommends crimson curtains for dining rooms in the 1820s. So we use that little tidbit of documentation, but they're, again, a period style. The windows are large and illuminating. Again, the house was built before electricity, so they had to rely on the windows for much of the illumination. They're 12 over 12 double sash. The glass is the typical 9.5 by 7.5 stock size glass of the period from before 1825.
Now, do you come in here, though? I think, do you actually come in here? Do you have memorable family occasions in here where you feel very comfortable?
Oh, yes, all the time, yeah.
Doesn't feel like a museum to you?
No, I'm very used to this environment. I think my family is, too.
Okay. Now, John, it seems that there's a lot of fireplaces in this house. Do they all work?
Yes, they do, yeah. We have another fireplace here, a Rumford-style fireplace, heating fireplace. Very essential in a bedroom.
Yeah, lovely and cozy in here. Now, the restoration, you were true to it in this room?
Once again, yes, we tried to. This would have been a fairly important room for the family. It would have been like a morning parlor where the family would have congregated in the master bed chambers and had a fireplace so it was warm. And you would wash here. Toiletries were part of the furnishings in a master bed chamber, and the family probably came and dressed around the fireplace to keep warm.
And they all washed together and warmed together?
Washed and stayed together. Families that wash together stay together, yes.
An old adage, I'm sure.
I guess so.
Now you have the furniture in here, of course, is very authentic. Now, is that a wash basin that you have there, where the families would have been all gathered around?
Yes, that's a traveling commode stand with a mirror that folds inside, and facility on top for the wash basin and wash stand. A tester bed or a high post bed with the curtains. We've got the winter curtains off of it right now because it's springtime.
It has a different set of outfits?
It does, yeah. You have counter panels, which are curtains that go inside of the valance curtains to keep the draft out in the winter months. So you're building a sort of mini micro environment inside of the bed. You're tented in. Now,
would this type of furniture in this room, would this be indicative of the type of person who would have afforded this house, or is that the person who slept in that bed would maybe be, from a different class, or?
Well, when you look at the war loss claims, which sort of itemize a lot of the furniture that was lost by people, middle-class people here in the Niagara Peninsula, probably furnishings like this were quite typical. For example, the chest-on-chest behind you was made by Zimmerman, who was a Mennonite cabinet maker right here in Louth, and this one has an 1824 date on one of the inside drawers. So it's just probably quite typical. Yeah.
You know what you're talking about when it comes to the furniture.
I hope so.
Now, I know you're in the process of restoring other parts of the house. Can we see some of your latest efforts?
Sure. Let's go down to the parlor.
You were saying earlier this was a tavern once, this part?
Yeah. The parlor aspects that are around us right now really are from the Victorian period of the house's history. When I was restoring this, I was faced with a bit of a dilemma, whether to restore it to the earlier period or to keep much of the Victorian facade that was here, the plaster, the oak graining. It was extant in fairly good condition, so I decided to keep it. But while we were restoring that, we found the remains of what's known as a bird cage, which is a bar room, and it's just behind me here.
Okay. Now, what would that be used for?
Well, it was sort of a countertop thing. It's a wooden grate or door that opens, and it'd be closed at closing time, and it would contain all the alcohol and other good stuff locked behind it. But it was really a countertop where they would have served food and liquor from.
So kind of like when they're locking up the tea, they lock up the liquor? I'm starting to get the feel of the history here.
The gist of it, yes.
Now, you've been explaining how your family lives in this old museum-type house. Is it something you want to continue with? Do you see yourself wandering
I'll live out my days here, I'm sure, yes. Yeah.
What is it about the house that does it for you? Where does it touch your soul?
I like traditional things. I have a yearning for that. I think I feel comfortable in a traditional setting. My maternal family history was local and from the same period as the house, so I feel quite comfortable and at home here. Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you reenact parts of wars here, and do you take us back in history? Do we have to dress in period? Where
Well,
we
we've had period dinners, and we'll have to have you over for one of those. Yes, sure.
Okay, just
Great.
tell me what to wear.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It was a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Patience and a reverence for history guided the restoration of the Brown home. John and Heather have preserved the past while still making a place for a modern 90s family. I'm Arlene Bynan. Thanks for joining me on Images of Home.
Actor Dave Thomas chats with Brian Linehan about his SCTV heydays, John Candy, and a new book. Tonight at 8:30 Eastern on WTN.